Good evening and welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting this Wednesday the 15th of September. My name is Councillor Ian Pickett and I'm Chairman of this committee. This meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel, and during the meeting, if you wish to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan in your general direction. Before we begin the formal agenda, I'm obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask you to make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the Town Hall and congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will give instructions when it is safe to return to the building. So moving on to the formal agenda, the first item of business is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of August 2021. Can I ask members to indicate whether they're happy for those minutes to be signed? Okay, thank you. Anyone object? That's fine. Okay, that's 2 abstentions, 8 in favour, so those minutes are passed. Okay. The second item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, Veronica?
2 apologies for this evening from Councillors Eccleston and Billis. Their substitutes respectively are Councillor Mrs Hassel and Byrne.
Thank you very much. The third item is declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct. So firstly, are there any non-pecuniary interests? Councillor Gillies?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you know, I've brought this to committee through resident concerns in the village of Pailton. I'm attending this meeting with open-minded, considering I am a member of the parish council at Pailton. But as usual, I normally stand away from any planning matters during the council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any items under B, pecuniary interests? Yep. And anything under notice under section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment community charge or council tax? Okay. Good. Okay, so we come to agenda item 4, which is applications for consideration. So the order in which each item will be dealt with. First, the planning officer will speak and present the application. Then the representatives for the objectors, the applicants, and finally the ward councillor will be invited to speak. After each speaker, committee members will be asked if they have any points of clarification from the speaker. Any ward member or councillor who speaks on an application as part of the public speaking process will be asked to leave the meeting once all speakers have completed their presentations related to it. Members of the committee will then go into debate on the application, asking relevant questions of the planning officer if necessary. A formal recommendation will be made and voted on. For public speakers, they will have 3 minutes to make their presentation, and they will be warned by a short alarm when they have 30 seconds left, and then a further alarm will sound once their time has expired. Their presentation should then be brought to a halt and no extra time will be allowed. All speakers should direct their presentations to amplifying the planning matters they have previously put to us for the benefit of the committee. Speakers should restrict their comments to material planning considerations only, and any non-planning issues will be disregarded. And speakers should not introduce any additional information that has not been brought to the planning authority's attention, or introduce late items that have not been suitably considered by officers and properly addressed in the officers' report to planning committee. Finally, no visual aids or handouts may be used, and no questions to officers or members will be allowed, and no members of the public are allowed to take part in the presentation. Okay, so we will move to the first item, which is with Chris Bates, and that is R21/0376, the disused telephone exchange on Coventry Road. Over to you, Chris.
'76 at the disused telephone exchange Coventry Road in Pailton. Just before I begin with the presentation, a slight amendment to the committee report as published. For clarification, Councillor Gillies has only been expressing views of certain constituents that contacted him, and this does not reflect his personal view, and he has specifically stated that he does not object to the proposals. So on to the application. application site, which is red-edged here on site location plan, is just to the east of the village of Pailton, and as such resides in the West Midlands green belt. It is connected via the thoroughfare through Coventry Road, and its close proximity to the Carmen chicane here. As per the proposal, the application seeks to convert the existing disused building to a single dwelling house, which is going to be a 2-bedroom property. The proposed design is to incorporate a gambrel-style roof, which will see approximately 400mm increased in the existing roof height. The fenestration will include extensive front glazing, as well as dormer windows and roof lights in the roof space. Of note, on the eastern elevation, these are to be dummy dormer windows, and the existing access is to be used to provide 2 off-road parking spaces. In terms of the site, as you can see, the building and the actual access is in front of you. The building consists of a large opening on the front elevation with some signs of fenestration in terms of small windows. The access encompasses a large forecourt to the front with the access off Coventry Road, and as you can see, hedgerows has continued to grow to either side. So in terms of this site's current status, it's quite dilapidated. Here's a photograph of the building internally. And 2 photos of the building looking away from the village boundary, so looking westward. On the left-hand side, you can see a photo taken close to the Pailton Ex-Servicemen's Club, and then on the right-hand side, a closer-up photograph. A few shots looking up and down Coventry Road. On the left-hand side is taken in close proximity to the access. And that's looking towards the village boundary of Pailton. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the access point in the background, and this is looking away from the village. Here's the existing plans. As you can see, the elevations and the floor plans. The site plan here shows a large forecourt to the front and small access points, small amenity, small gaps either side. Regards to the proposed plans, and gambrel roof design is incorporated with, as I said, with extensive glazing to the front. The gambrel roof projects outwards, so whilst the actual floor space is not increasing, the roof will see an expanding point, so it allows 2 bedrooms on the first floor. From the floor plans, you can see on the ground floor there is to be open plan kitchen, dining, living room, and as I said, on the first floor there is to be 2 bedrooms. And here is a illustrative design. The key issues: the principle of development. The application site lies within the greenbelt and out of any defined settlement boundary. As per local national policy, as per the local plan, new development will be resisted, and only where national policy and greenbelt allows will development be permitted. The extension to the existing building represents an approximate 16.42% increase. As per paragraph 149 criterion C of the NPPF, this does not represent disproportionate additions over and above the original building, and thus complies. And to preserve openness and permanence of the greenbelt character, permitted development rights have been removed as per condition 4. Qualities, character and amenity area. The building utilises an existing building and puts it into viable use, which does not present any harm on the building or the area through its gambrel roof design. Also, matching materials are to be used where necessary as per condition 3. To further safeguard the development, a landscaping scheme has been put forward as per condition 15 with various recommended hedge planting specifications. Highway safety. County Council Highways have raised no objection to the proposal, as the conversion will utilise the existing access. Due to speed limit, it's been considered unfair to apply a visibility display given for a road of 50 miles per hour, as the access is seen to be circa 30 miles per hour. Therefore, sufficient visibility displays will be provided when the subsequent hedgerows are maintained. A technical note was submitted which demonstrates that a vehicle can enter in a forward-facing gear, turn around and then exit again in a forward-facing gear. Whilst it is in close proximity to the chicane, it does not present any issues as the position of the access allows for good intervisibility and sufficient space for a car to pass if a vehicle was blocking the property access. Other matters, there are no detrimental impacts on parking provisions, biodiversity, residential amenity, air quality, land contamination, sustainable buildings and broadband services, and these have all been secured by condition where necessary. An amendment to the decision notice, condition 15, as well as the planting specification, shall also include the below statement. This demonstrates a contingency plan to replace planting for up to 10 years. With regards to the planning balance and the recommendation, the planning balance, the proposals are considered to not represent disproportionate additions upon the original building, so therefore the overall impact on the openness of the green belt is considered to be negligible. The nature of the proposals is considered to respect the character and design, the scale and the character of the surrounding area, whilst not adversely impacting the amenities of any nearby properties, nor impacting any protected species, and not providing any detrimental impact to highway safety. Other matters have also been considered and to safeguard development have been secured by way of conditions. The proposals, as a result, comply with the RBC local plan and the latest MPPF, which is from 2021. Officer's recommendation is approval subject to appropriate conditions and informatives.
Thank you very much, Chris. So we will now come to the speakers, and the first speaker we have is the registered supporter, and that is Mr. Chris Stratton of Countryside Planning Services Limited. So, Mr. Stratton, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Normally, in these circumstances, I wouldn't seek to enhance any of the points made by the planning officer. And I have to say that Mr. Bates' identification and summary of the issues has been exceptional. I deal with a number of applications and he identified a number of areas required additional information and we provided that to him and appeared to have satisfied all the concerns that he has. On this particular occasion, I would like to make some comments in relation to access, which I understand has been the cause for concern from some people. I would firstly point out that it's an existing commercial access, so commercial vehicles of the size of large GPO vans, as BT was before it became BT, have accessed that site and are perfectly entitled to do so under the existing arrangements, as there would be no change there. Secondly, Mr. Bates requested a report on the access and the ability to arrive and leave in forward-facing gears. That was commissioned by the applicant and presented to the Warwickshire County Council Highways Department. They considered it and the situation in there independently and concluded that there was no problem with the access. It was perfectly safe, or as safe as any other access. I'd also point out that there are several other accesses in the vicinity, similar position in relation to the safety bollards, the access into the club, just the next one in towards the village. And from that, I would conclude that all elements to do with the access, as far as they are material to the consideration, have been considered by professionals whose job it is to do that, and they have announced to themselves that they're perfectly satisfied with all of the arrangements as they've been made. So I don't believe access would be a material consideration that would do anything other than, or it's not material to change the officer's recommendation. On that basis, I'd commend the application to the councillors and very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stratton. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Gillies.
Yeah, just one question really, at this point anyways. The access will be for 2 vehicles, and the design you gave us for manoeuvring a car around to do a three-point turn was for one vehicle. So when the two vehicles are parked there, how are we going to manoeuvre them round so they're facing in a forward direction?
I believe that matter would have been considered by the Warwickshire County Council Highways officers as part of their assessment. The application was clear on the issues and the ability to park two vehicles on site. The plan showed by Officer Bates showed a vehicle represented on the drawings, and I think you could park two vehicles in front of the property, both of which could then reverse and manoeuvre past the rear of the other one. It would be up to the councillors to make their own decisions on that. But what I would point out is that there are a significant proportion of the dwellings within Paleton that don't have parking for two vehicles, but two vehicles reside at those properties. I can say that. I was born and bred in Brinklow, and my living working as a farm labourer, driving through the village and tractors doing harvest for 3 summers while I was at university. So I am familiar with the village and know it really quite well. I've got several friends who used to live there.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions for Mr. Stratton? No? Okay, thank you very much. So we will now have the ward councillor. Councillor Heather-Timms, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I have come today to repeat the concerns of residents with regard to the vehicle access to this proposed residential building, plus the parking around the property. Firstly, the historic use by telephone workers was infrequent and certainly not at the level of that required for a domestic location. There is also much increased traffic on the road, including HGV and car usage to Magna Park. Residents have questioned the assumptions used by highways in this report, including traffic in the area being 30 mile-an-hour max. The chicane was put in to calm traffic entering the village. A village speeding monitoring device has monitored the speed for 7 days. It was set at 35 miles an hour. 2,776 vehicles came through inbound to Paleton at an average speed of 39 miles per hour, and the total vehicles in the week were 36,834, with the fastest vehicle recorded at 63 miles per hour. It can safely be stated that at least 73,000 vehicles pass this chicane on a weekly basis. There have been very many small RTAs and near misses, with the chicane bollards having to be replaced many times. The house access is close to the chicane entrance to the village, and once the correct road markings are in place, there should be 2 solid white lines down the centre of the road, meaning that the motor vehicles must not cross them or parked vehicles must not park near them. Where are the visitors to this dwelling going to park, and will they restrict visibility lines? There should be at least conditions in place to restrict parking around the chicane, on the highway at the access, or on the very well-used footway. Indeed, you saw pictures today which indicated the car across the footway. This would mean the cars would be restricted to the house perimeter. This is not in the village. It is on an isolated position on the outskirts of the village by a very dangerous slow-down chicane. So I think the points raised about other villages and parking on the highway are not actually the same as in this particular position. I ask that you take these very valid concerns of residents into account when making your decisions, and at the very least ensure there are parking restrictions on the road around the chicane and on the footway adjacent to the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Timms. Are there any questions from councillors? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave now. Okay, so can I ask who wishes to open the debate this evening? Councillor Sanderson?
Thank you, Chair. It was the site visit was well worthwhile. It gave us a better understanding of the context of the building and the access in and out of the site. From what we could see, it was clear that this will be a modest two-bedroom dwelling. It clearly will bring a almost semi-derelict building back into use. It was clear that there was enough space for access and egress on and off the site. And I'm afraid the county councillor needs to talk to the county council about improvements to the highway. I think that goes beyond the remit of our planning committee. So from what we saw, I am no hesitations but to support for approval.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Gillies?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chairman. Yes, everybody brought up some valid points, really, but to make mention that the anti-skid surface between the chicane elements, when that was put down and the reinstatement of the lines were put down, it wasn't in accordance of the approved plan. And anybody wants the number of the approved plan, it was Warwickshire County Council, Tango Sierra 5832/3. So that's the approved plan for the traffic calming scheme throughout the whole of the village. It does mean that there are going to be two white lines stretching back from the giveaway markings about 20 to 30 metres, which will restrict any parking in that area or overtaking of those lines in order to try and keep the traffic flow down to a sensible speed. The other thing is, just a point of information, is that we did have a very intelligent and knowledgeable guy that lived in our village for the best part of 50 or 60 years, and he wrote a book about the history of the village. And on it, of course, he makes mention of all sorts of buildings, and one of them, of course, is the very first automatic telephone exchange, built on that site in 1938 and closed in 1970. Now, unfortunately, BT didn't exist in 1970. It was General Post Offices. And the biggest vehicle you'd ever see on that would be an 850 Morris Minor van, probably with a little ladder on the top. That would be the biggest one you see. But of course, in the 1930s and 40s, you see, when things were just after the war, with automatic switching gear inside that building, you see, what you would have had stamped on it, made in England rather than made in China. You see, you would have had something that worked well, worked a long time, and didn't need hardly any maintenance. And at the site visit, I did point out that the guy that was the local telephone engineer did live at number 38 Coventry Road until he retired in about 1968. So there's a bit of information there for you. So let's get the facts right about the number of vehicles that are likely to come in and out of there when it was used, and when it's the amount of vehicles are likely to come in and out of there as a residence. And the answer I had about how to turn two vehicles round parked at the front was not convincing. It just is not convincing. It isn't possible to turn two vehicles round if they're parked together on that site and come out in a forward motion. It is a very, very dangerous point. And other information I'd give you is that the chicane had to be positioned where it was. It was ideally to be positioned closer to the village, but unfortunately, due to the access into Pailton Club, which is now defunct, and the farm access, it had to be pushed out. If it was moved out any further, it would be useless. It would be totally ineffective. And at that time, the builders were used for nothing. So that was the decision made, and it was supported by the county council. I've got a struggle to work out when the tree planting is done, two rows of trees on the inside of the fence, how will that restrict the turning circle to do your three-point turn with one car? Where do wheelie bins being put? Where is storage going to go? The other question, which is not normally a planning issue, is regarding sewage. There is no main sewage anywhere near that property. One of the residents who lives in the village is the local builder, and he's installed all of the septic tanks on all of the properties outside the village. And he tells me you can't fit a septic tank into that property because you need a soakaway, and due to the porosity test in that area, it wouldn't work. So what you've got to do is put a cesspool, and that has to be dug into the front of the building. It's about 4 metres square by about 2 metres deep, and it has to be pumped out because that has to collect all of the foul water and solids. It has to be pumped out 3 to 4 times a year. Therefore, you'd need a tanker parked on the side of the road to pump it out. Now, if it's decided that vehicles should not park on the side of the road, then of course that isn't going to be done, is it? It's going to be very, very difficult. Access is the key to this, although I'm not very, very happy with the design, because certainly when we look at the Greenbelt policy, section 145, section C, it suggests that the extension or alteration of a building, provided that it does not result in disproportionate additions over and above the side of the original building. Now, it's going to be a little bit bigger, but then our own Greenbelt policy, it says the proposal of a high-quality design building should retain the external and internal features. Now, the external feature is totally different, completely different from its original design. So that flies in the face of our Green Belt policy. And it's a shame, really, because I was on an online discussion this morning with parish councillors from 4 or 5 parishes, with the head of policy, and we were talking about just that. Why isn't the council implementing policy? Now you've got the chance. Implement the policy. I've got a proposed refusal, both on certainly on the access. It is very, very dangerous. Also on the Green Belt policy, and also on sustainability. We should be approving development that is fit for the 21st century, not for next week or next month, the next century. There is no access there or places for children to play. The condition, one of the conditions suggests that there should be no fence. So if there are children playing at the front, they run out into the road, or a football goes out into the road at that point, what do you think is going to happen? Well, we're going to have a problem. So I'll move in refusal.
Okay, so we have proposal moved by Councillor Sanderson, and we have refusal moved by Councillor Gillies. Councillor Shrivastava, and then we'll come to Councillor Lewis, then Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a very comprehensive report for the officer, and all the points have been considered. A lot of issues have been raised about the access. Warwickshire County Council, a responsible organisation for assessing the situation, has no objection. And looking at the sketch, it's a derelict site, and it will be a great improvement what it is now. So I support the proposal by Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Councillor Shrivastava. Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Tony, as usual, has given us a lot of interesting history of the sites, which is interesting, but a lot of it probably not applicable, or was looking at the issue of sewage, for instance, is not anything that we've got to decide on. That's a separate issue. I found it very useful today to actually go out on the site visit. And it's a shame, really, that only 5 councillors went out today, because you can actually see where the chicane is and the access and so on the building. I think if it's approved, then it'll bring back into use a building which hasn't been used for many years, and it's an improvement. I believe that it's been shown that cars can manoeuvre on the site to go in forwards and come out forwards. Even with 2 cars, I could think of where that could be done. So I'm also in support of the officer's conclusions, and if it hasn't already been seconded, then I'll second it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Raven, I believe, was next, and then Councillor Byrne.
Yes, thank you. It's worth noting, Chair, that Councillor Brown put her hand up too. Just a point to note that Councillor Gillies's comments were very valid, and he raised a lot of practical objections, which I actually agree with. I did visit, not today, but I made a point of visiting earlier in the week when I was available to visit, and took some time to stand there. So I would second Councillor Gillies's refusal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Byrne?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a question just to ask the officer and then a general comment, if I may. On page 10 of the report, it's point 5.10. It says that no road safety audit has been requested. This is under the highways section. Who would normally request an audit to be done on that road safety aspect if it's not Rugby Borough Council planning of the highways department? It's the fourth line down on point 5.10. They have confirmed a road safety audit has not been requested. And I would have thought in the instances that a few people have mentioned here, that should have been requested.
I think it was their consideration that obviously regards to the proposals and the existing access is already there, then that was not necessary. So that's my understanding of it, really. I mean, there was communication further from her, no objection, and she clarified a lot of points that Councillor Gillies did raise. But yeah, for the sake of the application and the fact that it was using existing access, they felt that wasn't needed, and I think that would have been clarified in the technical note as well.
They felt it wasn't necessary, but they're saying it wasn't requested. So I was just wondering whose responsibility would it normally be to make that request if it's not Rugby Borough Planning?
Yes, just through you, Chair, and just to confirm that point. Warwickshire County Council Highways Department are consulted on applications such as this, and it is for them and their technical team to actually request a road safety audit if they feel one is necessary. We at Rugby Council don't have any highway expertise, so we rely on the Highway Authority at Warwickshire County Council to make that request. In this particular occasion, they obviously felt that it wasn't required.
Right, thank you for that. Second question, if I may, Chair. It's an observation, really. In terms of the access into the site, I think my concern in terms of the road safety aspect is that people coming through the village, entering, if the occupier of the house came through Paleton Village, through the chicane, and wished to turn right into that property, there could be a line of cars immediately outside the property, the egress from the property, if you like. They would be lined up themselves waiting to go through that chicane. And he'd have a right blockage of cars because he couldn't turn right into the premises, and the cars trying to come out of Paleton would be stuck behind him. And I was just wondering, in terms of the highways aspect, had they considered putting in a hatching area saying keep clear or something to that effect, so the vehicles trying to access that drive could drive straight in there and not block all the vehicles coming behind him from the Paleton direction. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think Richard's going to come in now.
Yeah, again, through you, Chair. Again, the Highway Authority will have obviously considered these points. They will have, obviously they're aware that the chicane is now in place in that site. They'll have looked at the relationship of the chicane to the proposed access and obviously have deemed it acceptable as per the proposed plans. Now, obviously, if members felt there's been notice some discussion tonight about markings and about how perhaps some of the road markings that are actually there in place today don't necessarily correlate with the technical drawings that the Highway Authority have sought for that location. That's obviously separate to this particular application. But it could be that whilst we can't necessarily impose any conditions specifically related to this, we could actually put a note to applicant on about these road markings, and we can then obviously take that up as a separate issue if it is correct that actually what is on site today doesn't necessarily correlate with what Warwickshire County Council have approved as road safety measures for that part of Pailton.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. And I think personally I'd certainly appreciate an informative or a comment to that effect if this application is approved. Councillor Brown and then Councillor Daly.
Yes, thanks. I've got an observation and a question really for our officers. The observation is, I think Warwickshire County Council need to look at the effectiveness of the chicane that's in place there, because if there seems to be a plethora of bumps, accidents, problems with it that possibly point towards it not being the most effective traffic calming device there could be. The question is around this. The application, if it's actually within a green belt, within the West Midlands green belt, and it's out of any defined settlement boundary, one of the issues that residents seem to have with that is that if it's approved here, it sets some kind of precedent that says, okay, it's happened there, it could happen in the ex-serviceman's area, or it could happen in any other development. What assurance do the residents have that each application would be taken on its merits, and that should this happen, and actually so far I think it should, but what assurance would they have that that doesn't set a precedent and allow other developments to come on board?
Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Coming back to a specific point, yes, each application, you're correct, is assessed on its own merits in accordance with our local plan policies, but also having regard to national guidance as well. Now, Greenbelt policy does allow for the conversion of redundant buildings, and it does allow for their extension, provided that there is no disproportionate additions to them, which obviously has been outlined in the report. Obviously, this building in question is close to the village of Pailton, which I understand has a population, I think, of over 500 people in there. It's accepted, yes, from a sustainability point of view. There are limited services there, but there is obviously an established community there, which is within walking distance from that property. So these are different factors that you would look at for each time you look at perhaps a redundant building or a previously developed site, which obviously this is now, which the new national guidance places substantial weight on. And that is very different to some other of our redundant previously developed sites that are in the green belt. So although this is outside the settlement boundary, it is quite close to it. It is not necessarily a sort of greenfield site. So there are factors like that, along with many others, that we would have to take into account with each application. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that another building like that would automatically get a green light if this one was approved.
Councillor Daly.
Thank you. I just had a quick question for the officer. It's regarding the points made from Pailton Parish Council on page 6. So there's an initial section which seems to say that this application was discussed and there were some concerns about the giveaway signage on Coventry Road, but then the Parish Council are happy with the change of use applied for. I was just wondering when the follow-up comments came, because in the first box I kind of read it that the Parish Council didn't seem to have enormous concerns about this, but then there's obviously the follow-up bullet points which express residents' concerns. I just wondered if we know what the Parish Council's opinion on this was.
So reading the officer report, the first bullet point was the initial comment, and then obviously the latter ones were those expanded on. So in response to your question, they were happy with the change of use applied for from a storage building to a residential use, but in light of that, they've still got issues with the access. So, I mean, I don't think I can really expand on that, unfortunately. But yeah, it was a collection of emails which I received throughout the process of the application, and obviously I think it came along with discussions throughout the village that residents did have issues with the change of use, and that's when they got in contact with the parish council.
Okay, thank you.
Just speaking for myself for a moment, I found the site visit this afternoon very helpful to give me an idea of the application we were discussing. I think on the principle of bringing a redundant building back into use, this kind of application is exactly what that policy is there for. There can be no doubt that the building is entirely redundant at the moment, and this would bring it back into use. I appreciate the points made by Councillor Gillies about the design, but the design has been judged to be acceptable by the officer. In terms of the access onto the site, to me, there is certainly access for 2 vehicles. I think we could all see that. The question is about turning on the site, and if 2 vehicles were driven in a forward-facing gear onto that at the same time. I do understand the concerns that have been raised about trying to turn those vehicles around at the same time. There are ways that you could do it, but it would require the drivers on site to know what they were doing. Personally, I think the access and the visibility is absolutely fine, so I've got no issues on that front. So I think I would be minded to support this application at this time. I know that both Councillors Sanderson and Gillies wish to come back for a moment. So we'll first go to Councillor Gillies, then to Councillor Sanderson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a bit of history about the chicane, actually, and that is that during the process of designing it, we set up a subcommittee of 9 folks, and we travelled around all the traffic calming elements in Leicestershire and Warwickshire. So we spent quite considerable time, and we looked at things like humps, rumble strips, road narrowings, flat top humps, sinusoidal humps, you name it, we looked at everything. And we did find that the chicane was the one thing that created an obstacle that people had to slow down for. And the result of those that don't slow down, they damage their car. And there's a lot of history of damaging their vehicle. So that's the story behind that. But if you understand that position and look at the flow of traffic for any length of time, you'll know that traffic going into the village tend to go on the opposite side of the road, so they're on the wrong carriageway. They've committed themselves to the manoeuvre, and then lo and behold, a vehicle appears out of the village around the blind bend who have the right of way, and there you have a head-on collision situation. It happens. It has happened. Only the other day, my neighbour mentioned that they'd been walking along the footpath. There was a bit of an altercation of who was going to go through the chicane, and a Land Rover drove straight up onto the pavement, just in front of them. Beggars belief. But let's think about how the village, in 1970, the village was a different place. You'd got to be an adult in 1970 to understand how the world has changed since then. Absolutely, totally changed. I mean, the traffic that flowed through that village then, you could probably measure it in the hundreds, low hundreds. Now it's in the thousands, nearly 10,000 a day. Incredible. At that time we had 4 working farms in the village. One of them delivered doorstep milk to the people in the village. There were 3 shops, 3 public houses, the ex-servicemen's club, and 2 coach stations. That was a sustainable community. No, there's nothing. It's all gone. So we've just got to, be careful about what we approve and make sure it is safe, because what I've said tonight, I'm going to sleep well tonight, because I've said all the things that concern our community. Now, if you vote it through, you've got to live with your decision. But there we are.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Gillies, I'm very keen on heritage, but I know I can't live in yesteryears. I think what we've got to look at is the application that's before us and the report of the officer. And it's very clear that it's a viable site for a unit of housing. In terms of the access, I thought Richard made a very sensible suggestion with regard to the informative and the parish council can take that informative to Warwickshire County Council to look to see what improvements they can make at that location. It's not the applicant's problem. We can only my concern is if we refuse this tonight, and it should go off to appeal, we will not have a leg to stand on in terms of this application, because there's nothing there that says that the application itself is a problem.
Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the site visit because of work commitments today, so I've listened to the debate with great interest. I'd also read through the report from the officer, which I have to say was really comprehensive and well put together, so thank you for that. Based on the report and the debate, I don't think there's any clear reason to be turning this application down. I do think there's a real danger, as Councillor Sanderson pointed out, that we turn it down for quite speculative reasons with no merit in planning. It sounds like the surface outside of the village and the lines do need to be amended and put together properly. But that's not for the applicant to dictate. That's a county council issue. Again, I don't think the applicant should be penalised because idiots and Range Rovers can't drive properly. They shouldn't be penalised because people are breaking the law and speeding either. So again, if we can only judge this case on the application at hand and not make judgments around what people should not be doing. So I'll be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McQueen. Are there any other speakers? No. Okay, well, the application, so approval was proposed first by Councillor Sanderson and seconded by Councillor Sevastova. So we will take that first. Can I just confirm, Councillor Sanderson, are you moving approval as written with the amendments set out by the officer?
That's correct.
Okay. So can I ask all those in favour? Sorry, Councillor.
Just one point, Chairman, and that is with the condition about parking on the side of the road.
So are you
on non-street parking?
Richard?
Because it'd be right on the junction, you see, within the 10 metre, because that is a junction. So parking within 10 metres of junction isn't legal.
I mentioned informative, obviously what was with regard to road markings.
Right, okay.
Do you wish...
Chair, I put it forward for approval with the informative the head of the service has put forward, and I don't think we can get any clearer than that.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Srivastava, can I just confirm you're happy to second that? Thank you. Okay, so all those in favour of approval under those conditions?
That's 10-4.
10-4. All those against? 2. Okay, so that application is approved as set out, and that is the only application before us this evening. So we will come to agenda item 5, which is notice of site visits. Richard, are there any?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have a request for an application to be called to committee and to have a site visit from Councillor Jerry Roothouse. That is for application R21/0872. The proposal is for 3 dwellings at 130 Ashlawn Road, Rugby. The reason he would like this to be brought to committee is for their determination to have a site visit is because he feels it conflicts with policy SDC1. He believes the size and mass is not in keeping with the area. There is no biodiversity impact assessment that has been conducted. Existing gardens act as green corridors, and the proposed screening, which is conifers, is unacceptable.
Thank you very much, Richard. Can I ask all those in favour of a site visit to raise their hands, please? Okay, make that 11. All those against? And any abstentions?